Welcome to the Athletic Supporters, the 2,487th podcast on the internet. But the first that asked the question, can five friends prove that they know anything about sports that they think they're experts in? This is how it works. We talk about sports, and when we want to change the topic, you'll hear this. Now let's meet the guys.
Hi, I'm Kevin Shea.
Kevin's written 20 hockey books, so naturally Kevin's going to lead the conversation about hockey.
Hi, I'm Kim Cook.
Kim is going to do a deep dive on baseball analytics because, well, that's what he does.
Hi, I'm Tim Burgess.
Could you tell that Tim was from England? Since he grew up in Europe, he's going to teach us all about the exotic sports, such as F1, cricket, and rugby.
Hi, I'm Ian Marchant.
Ian's a Montreal Canadiens fan, but since the Canadiens suck this year, Ian's going to enlighten us all about things soccer. And I'm Steve Waxman. I bounced a basketball against the wall of my parents' apartment when I was 10, and that bit of mischief gave birth to a lifelong passion.
Hi, and welcome to the first edition of the Athletic Supporters. This is a great time to start the podcast because the NHL and the NBA playoffs are about to begin. Major League Baseball just kicked off, and Canada is in the World Cup of Soccer. And just as an added bonus, I guess, the Masters, the first major of the golf season, happened just the other day. So there's just so much to talk about. So let's see if we can just knock all this off in the next 10 minutes. So, Kev, you wanted to talk about the season that Austin Matthews has had?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
extraordinary. So, you know, the media has been all over the folks who have reached the 50-goal plateau for the Leafs through the years, and you know, it took a long time, but the first one was Rick Vaive, and he scored 3 consecutive seasons of 50 goals or more. And then Gary Leeman, of all people, who was drafted as a defenseman, he hit 51 as well. And then there was the Dave Andreychuk situation where he was traded from Buffalo to Toronto. Collectively, he scored 50 plus goals, but the next season, 92-93, he scored over 50 goals as well. So it had been a while. A lot of teams have superstars through the years, and you know, we've talked about Montreal Canadiens a little bit, but you know, you think of all the great players, the Richards, the Bellevaux, the Schuts, the Lurs, and whatever. It goes on and on. And Toronto's had really good players, but they haven't had that superstar. You know, they've had Daryl Sittler, terrific player, and Matt Sundin, and you know, there's other players we can name, but they aren't of the same. Pardon me?
Frank Mahovlich.
Yeah, absolutely, going way back as well. But they weren't those superstars, and I mean, they were superstars for the Leafs for sure, but they don't have the same kind of marquee value that some of the other names have. So all of a sudden, for Austin Matthews to come along and to set the franchise record at this point, he's got 58 goals in a season, which is beyond belief, including 51 goals in 50 games. Not to start the season, but through the last 50 games, and it's just so exciting to watch. He makes it look somewhat effortless. He has all the tools, and it's really nice to be able to see a player step up this way and become the superstar, and see Matthews jerseys everywhere you look. So he scores the franchise record against the Dallas Stars, and then against Montreal on Saturday picked up a couple more goals, and we'll see where it can go. I never want to prognosticate how many he's going to score because you just never know what's going to happen. But even at this point, you know, at 58, if he never scores another goal this season, it's an extraordinary situation, and we'll see what he can do in the playoffs. That's where it really, really counts.
Kevin, notwithstanding your tattoo and being as objective as possible, is he the Hart winner?
Well, I've thought about that a lot too. He's certainly in the conversation, but how do you ignore guys like McDavid and Draisaitl for Edmonton having superb seasons? The team isn't doing quite as well as anyone would have thought at the beginning of the season. But then out of nowhere, there's Roman Josi for Nashville, and there's Cale Makar for Colorado. Both defensemen. Josi is looking like he could lead the NHL in scoring this season, which hasn't happened since Bobby Orr. A defenseman hasn't led the league in scoring since Bobby Orr back in the 70s, and he could very well do it. And Cale Makar is just a machine out there. He's broken the franchise records for goals and assists and things too. So there's other names that are in play for sure, but Matthews has to certainly be considered as one of the favorites, no doubt about it.
And the dark horse, Jonathan Huberdeau.
Oh, I should have mentioned him, of course. What a season he's having down in Florida. He's been consistent through the years, but having a phenomenal season, and a guy that we don't hear enough about because I've clearly missed him. But anyway, he's a great player and is going to be one of the scoring leaders by the regular season end as well, leading the Florida Panthers to a first place finish in the division. So a lot on his shoulders too. So names that can be thrown out there. Shesterkin, the goaltender for the Rangers, certainly has been in conversations too. So it's a crapshoot. We'll see where the voters come through in the next little while. But I mean, my fingers crossed for Matthews, and we'll see where it goes. If I can just run a quick parallel, Doug Gilmour had a season for the ages back in 92, 93. Just an unbelievable season. And he finished second in Hart Trophy voting that year. And he took the Selke Trophy for the defensive forward of the season this year. Could it be a parallel with Matthews? Matthews certainly is a strong contender for the defensive forward trophy, the Selke Trophy as well. So we'll see. Lots of things to discuss on this program and many others too.
Talking, Kevin, about scorers in the past and Matthews having broken the record. And people scoring, over 50 goals in several seasons. I mean, Matthews hasn't done that, but really he probably would have broken the Leafs record 2 years ago, and definitely would have done last year had it not been for COVID. He was on course, I think, in both of those years to get past the Leaf record and without doubt get past 50 goals. So he's right up there, even though he hasn't got that sort of level of record yet. Clearly, it's only kind of, he's been robbed of it really by COVID. I mean, we've all been robbed of a lot of things by COVID, but definitely he has been robbed of the Leaf record probably 2 years ago and definitely last year. So I think he's right up there. He's phenomenal. 3 years in a row, he's had a real big chance. Yeah,
really valid points. You're absolutely right. He would have come so close without COVID, and COVID certainly, truncated the season for both of those years. So it's really unfortunate for him, but making up for lost time now.
Why is Matthews not getting the recognition that McDavid and Draisaitl do? Because I mean, I was watching the game the other night with you. I mean, the guy's a star. I've seen the highlights. When I watch the sports and accidentally show up on the sports podcast here, I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, it's like the guy's a star. So why isn't he getting that? Why isn't he spoken about in that same reverence?
Well, I think he does, but I mean, McDavid's got a track record that Matthews doesn't have. So does Draisaitl. Mm-hmm. Draisaitl's been a Hart Trophy winner himself. Both will be at the top of the league as far as scoring goes. Matthews will be a little bit lower than the two of them. Draisaitl has 50 plus goals now too. Mm. McDavid is just so darned exciting. And I think the other thing too, and I'm stepping out a little bit here too, but McDavid is quite a spokesman and quite an ambassador. Matthews is good, but he speaks in cliches. He's not a real effusive personality. Marner is a little bit more of that. Riley's a little bit more personable, a little bit more honest that way too. Matthews still hasn't found that role. He speaks a great deal, but he doesn't do it the same way. And so I think that's part of it as well. Maybe the fact that he makes it look easy, whereas McDavid will skate through the entire team and score the goals. Makar will do the same thing. So it's really tough to say. We live in a bubble here in Toronto where we hear about Matthews all the time, but we don't hear a great deal about the teams from the West divisions. And I think some of that goes as well. And there could be some anti-Toronto bias too. There's a lot of people who resent the fact that the Leafs get as much ink and TV time as they do. So you never know whether that plays in or not. I would hope it doesn't. You would hope that the voters would be honest and true to themselves, but we aren't in those alleyways to decide on those questions. So we'll see.
Yeah. Just with regard to Matthews, I just wanted to comment on my favorite part of the Habs game. It wasn't, the two goals were unbelievable, of course, in the start of the game, but there was a point where Corey Perry, veteran, hard rock Hab defenseman laid a vicious body check on Matthews, like a really hard check, knocked him to the ground. Now, one thing that I'm amazed by with Matthews, considering his size and strength, is he really does not use his body. But this was an exception. Within 30 seconds, he hammered Perry and laid an equally vicious check on him. I loved seeing that. Just an observation.
Kim, do you want to talk? I mean, I know you're so excited about the Blue Jays this year, and I'm really curious as to what you have to say about their chances and this roster that everybody is talking about.
Well, I'm going to start off by saying that Alek Manoah right now is shutting out the Yankees in the fourth inning, and he just dodged a bases-loaded bullet in the third by retiring Giancarlo Stanton. So this is all good news. I'm going to go out there and say that people talk about Kevin Gausman and his $100 million plus contract and Jose Berrios, both of whom are fine pitchers. But I'm going to say that Alek Manoah, when the dust settles at the end of the season, might be the Jays' best starter. We'll see. There's a prediction. You can call me on that one. The enthusiasm is 100% legitimate. I was scanning prognosticators in the last week, and a very high percentage of them are calling for the Jays to win the American League East. And that's so striking because 4 of the 5 teams, again, it's very analogous to the East Division or the Atlantic Division in hockey, Kev. 4 of the 5 teams are absolute, incredibly strong teams. Tampa, New York, Boston, and Toronto. They're all predicted to be high 80s to mid 90s in wins, and any one of them, frankly, could win the division. But I got to, I've not always been a big Rogers fan. I've got to give him credit. $20 million came off the payroll this year when Troy Tulowitzki's contract was finished being paid out. Not a lot of people realize that. So they really stepped up. They have spent money. They signed Gausman. They made the trade for Berrios. They made the trade for Matt Chapman, who, as you already knows, I'm a big fan of. So they replaced Robbie Ray. They replaced Semien. Now it's going to come down to the 162 game grind. And as we all got a reminder of yesterday when they jumped out to a 6-1 lead over Texas and ended up having their hat handed to them. They might win 95, but that means they're going to lose 67. It's going to be a long, hard season, but I'm unbelievably excited to see where it all goes.
So, Kim, one of the things that you wanted to talk about was about asking the question, how great is this current era of Toronto sports with the Leafs and the Raptors doing fairly well and the Jays having this big roster. And before we get into that and doing historical comparisons, Tim, when did you come over here? When did you come to Canada?
2000, September 2000.
And when did you become a Toronto homer?
About October 2000, I would say. Probably about then. Yeah.
Well, how did that happen so quickly?
I think it's kind of the passion of the convert. It's I came to Canada for personal family reasons at the time, and I'd been to Toronto many times, going back right into the sort of mid-late 80s. In fact, I first came as a kid, I think, in the 70s, and I'd always loved Toronto. So coming to Canada and living in Toronto was an easy thing to do for me. I mean, it's a long way from home, but it was not a hard choice to come here. But I think, like many immigrants, and you hear these stories from all immigrants of all walks of life, for many immigrants, particularly people who come to Canada, I expect it's probably true of every other country, but it's definitely true here. There's a real passion and a joy about becoming a Canadian. And obviously it takes some years to actually become a citizen, but just to become somebody who lives here and has decided to make their life here, there's a real joy about that. And one of the things that I think we like to do as immigrants is to become find something to share with other Canadians, because we're not Canadians yet. We don't really understand the country. We don't know what it's, when everybody says hello to everybody in the street coming from London, that's just really embarrassing. I think, you probably come across like a mad person, but apparently not. It's perfectly normal here. But there are, you want to find something that you can grab hold of and you can share, and you can go, I've got a little bit of Canadiana in me, right? And so coming to Toronto, the number one thing, especially back then, right now you could be a soccer fan and you'd fit right in, but especially 20 years ago, the only thing you could really do then to be anything like a native of Toronto and embed yourself in Toronto is become a Leaf fan. Unfortunately, I have, as we all know, I have a great friend here, Kevin, who I get to go to a lot of games with, and it was very generously took me to games early on, and it's one of the best sports, I think, to see in reality. To actually be in the venue. I think motor racing, which is my sporting passion, is terrible to see live because you see a tiny little bit of the circuit and you have no idea what's going on the entire time. But hockey, because the ice is about the size it is, you can see the entire game the whole time, and you can actually see it much better than you can see it on TV. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression, but it's understanding the game and having somebody so deeply ingrained in it with such knowledge and such history like Kevin talking to me about the game the entire time just made it really easy to become a massive Toronto Maple Leafs fan in no time. I mean, I probably would have done it anyway, just to try to become more Canadian than I was when I walked in at Pearson. But having Kevin alongside me to talk me through all of that just makes it really easy to become a Toronto Maple Leafs fan very quickly. So that's it, kind of.
No, that's good. Now, talking about immigrants, Ian, you're from Montreal.
I am.
So obviously, you don't feel warmly towards the Leafs, really, but you do feel warmly about other Toronto teams.
Yeah. The background, most of you know it. I grew up in the West Island, Montreal, which is a prominent English area. In my early teens, my parents offered me the opportunity to come down and go to a private school here in Ontario, where one of my older brothers had been to a private school in Quebec, and who was his housemaster is now the headmaster at this school in St. Catharines called Ridley. And I thought, we'll go down and give it a shot. And I ended up finishing high school there. And I guess that's the summer of grade 11, got offered a job here at a paper mill that my dad worked for a company called Domtar. They had a paper mill in the Don Valley. My eldest brother was living here, who I'd go and spend the long weekends that we get off as holidays at. So I just started getting into Toronto, and became a Blue Jays fan here. Although grew up sitting in Jonesville, as it was known, the bleachers at Jerry Park, and was there in the early years of the Expos, and grew up with that. So I'm a diehard Expos fan. But a friend of ours, Andrea, her dad had season tickets, and her parents went to the grand opening of the Sky Dome, and she took me to the first Blue Jays game there. And so that was my first experience of watching the Jays play, and became a Jays fan for that. And then, of course, with soccer/football, TFC, I'm a big soccer fan, and to have a local team here that I can go and see, who have some great Canadian players on their team, and great Canadian players also coming to play against them, who play in the soccer league against them. It's great. And, and then I got to play baseball here, which, another thing that Tim adjusted to in coming here. So a lot of good things about Toronto. You five guys are a great thing about Toronto.
Listen, look, you brought up soccer, and I think this is a good time for us to talk about Canada in the World Cup. I'm really curious. I'm not a huge soccer fan. I'm learning a little bit more. I have plenty of soccer fans that live in the house, and a kid that I watch grow up from being one of those tykes that follows the ball around to being, becoming a rec goalie that, won championships for his team by the time he was 18. So that was kind of exciting. I learned a little bit about soccer. And again, as I've said before, the worst rule in all of sports, offside in soccer. But but can you tell us a little bit about this group that Team Canada is in, and what their chances are? Where is it going to be a trouble for them, and where do you think they're going to have some success?
Well, first off, just to step back a bit on how they ended up in this group, because the draw happened last week. It's not truly a random draw. They set up 4 different pots of 18 each based on rankings, and the rankings are based on their success in their local regional tournaments that they play, just like we play in the CONCACAF, which is the tournament for North America. And they then do a draw of which those 8 are of 8 different groups, each consisting of 1 team from each of the 4 pots. So they do it that way to ensure in their mind they've got some disparity. There's no big disparities in any one pot to the other one. So one's not loaded up with all the big teams, and one's not loaded up with all the poorer teams. They just set the initial round, and then they set it up so each group has no more than 1 team from each continental area. So it's kind of like ranked ballots. That's how they set it up. So in our group, we ended up with Belgium, Morocco, and Croatia. It's a solid group of teams that we're coming up against. None of them are the level of Spain or France or Germany or England. Belgium's up there. They've got some great players. Same with Croatia. Morocco's a middling team at best. We have a real solid group of players right now some are playing in the Bundesliga in Germany. A number of playing are in the MLS here in North America. A couple in England, a few in France. So we've got a guys with lots of good experience there and a lot of international experience under their belt for playing for Team Canada. So what are our chances? I think we've got a chance to maybe finish second. Third should be a lock for us within our group. And it looks, I'd say we got a little over 50% chance of getting through if everything works for us right. Right now, the way the team's playing, as you've probably been watching, hopefully through the last 3 months, they've been had a number of games, even in the frozen hard field at down here at Toronto. Where the guys are playing, they're gelling together. We've got enough international experience and enough professional experience, well beyond what we had even 4 years ago at the last World Cup, and 8 years ago and 12 years ago before that.
I do want to move over to F1 because as I've mentioned before, over the course of the last few years, I've been watching Drive to Survive, and have become more and more I was more of a fan, I guess, of F1. I was trying to think, I was like, is there another word? No, I'm becoming a fan of F1 and I'm starting to understand it a little bit more and more, but there's so much I don't understand. But right now, Mercedes have dominated for so long, and Red Bull was up their butts for so long. And I know that the season's only 3 races in, but Ferrari's won 2 of the 3 races and have been in the money. And I'm just wondering, how is it that Ferrari has made this leap? And does it mean that Ferrari is going to be a part of the big 3, or they're going to take over and there's going to be Ferrari and Red Bull? What do you think, Tim?
I think that Ferrari had a fortunate go of it last season because they were not in the race, really. They were not in the championship race at all, which meant that early on last season, they could switch all of their efforts and all of their focus and all of their money and all of their development money to this season. So all the way through every season, the teams continually spend money and they're continually developing the cars and they're trying to make them faster with tiny increments all the way through the season. And if you're close to winning the championship and you are not winning it easily, clearly you have to keep developing because your opponent's going to keep developing. So they're going to keep spending money and keep focusing on the current car that they're racing at the time. Ferrari didn't have to do that. They knew they were not going to win the championship. They switched their focus to this year's car early on last year. So that's given them a bit of a head start over both Red Bull and Mercedes. And this season, there has been a huge change in the regulations. So the cars are very, very different from previous cars. The cars for the last, I guess, eight or nine seasons, I think, have basically had the same power units and the same aero regulations, the same car regulations, chassis regulations about how they're designed and how the wings are supposed to be and what you can do and you can't do with the bodywork. But that's changed massively this year. So all the cars are completely different, and the way that they use the air to give themselves downforce and more grip so that they can go around the corners more quickly and they can brake more quickly because they have massive grip between the tires and the track. That has changed fundamentally this year. So everybody is starting almost from scratch with their cars this year, completely new concepts. And some of them have got it right and some of them have got it less right. I mean, one of the most amazing things is all these teams build prototypes entirely independently, having no connection with each other, and they come out and they're racing within literally split seconds apart, which, you know, they're all completely separate teams, completely separate engineering, all their own concepts, and they can still come out and be maybe 0.1 of a second off each other. It's incredible how they do that. But so far, I think Ferrari have an advantage because of not chasing the championship last year. Red Bull are doing well because they're a very well organized team. They have great engineers and they've been very good for very long. And Mercedes have one fundamental problem with the car. I think they think their car is theoretically a second a lap faster than it's currently traveling at. And it's because they have, I won't go into too much of the technicalities of it, but they've got a problem with their underfloor aero, which means that it is not consistent. So instead of having consistent downforce, which helps the car just travel nice and smoothly and have loads of grip going around the corners, it has a problem where it has downforce and then it loses downforce. As it gets too close to the ground, it bounces off the ground, loses downforce, raises up, gets more downforce, gets sucked down to the ground, hits the ground, loses downforce. And so it's bouncing up and down, going down the straights. And you can actually see it going down the straights. It literally is bouncing up and down as it goes down the straight, which makes it unstable, obviously, very difficult to drive because the drivers can't see very clearly. They can't see the corners. They can't see their braking points in the same way. And it's not consistent grip going into corners and going into braking zones. So they have a fundamental problem that they're trying to fix, and they haven't fixed it yet. So that's a very long answer to your question, Steve, which is, I think that Ferrari are probably going to stay, if not at the front, they're definitely going to be one of the top three. I think Mercedes, being as smart as they are, they'll probably fix their problem. It really depends on how long it takes them to fix it. You know, are they going to fix it by race 4, or are they going to fix it by race 10 or race 15? Mm-hmm. And if they don't fix it till race 10 or 15, they ain't going to win the championship. But if they fix it by race 4 or 5, they might. So it's early, as you said, it's only early in the season. It's only 3 races. It's going to be very interesting to see what Mercedes do and how the other teams progress as well. And it's, you know, frankly, it's nice. I'm a Mercedes fan. I'm a huge Lewis Hamilton fan. But it's great seeing somebody else at the front. And it's great seeing Mercedes having to struggle because it's just makes it different.
But
Go ahead.
Tim, wasn't one of the things I thought they also tried the new regulations this year was to set it up so that the cars could follow closer to each other, which I think is also causing extra issues for Mercedes because of this whole, as they're calling it, porpoising issue that they're suffering from. Is the whole point was they're trying to get us so the cars, because what was happening in the past was all the air was coming off the car in front and it was wreaking havoc for the people who are trying to follow too closely. And if you watch Formula One, you'll see that sometimes they're so close to each other going at unbelievably high speeds. It's just like, it's unbelievable that they don't have more issues. But yeah, so I lost my train of thought on that. But yeah, it is quite interesting to see Mercedes go from, the team that was just walking away with it to, struggling. It's great. You know, you mentioned the thing about Ferrari concentrating. I think Haas is doing the same thing because they've been having a great year so far. Haas is a small team based out of America, and they're usually at the bottom of the results every year. But this year they've been making some great gains with their car.
Yeah, I think big regulation changes, are great in a sport like this because it does mixes up the order, mixes up the kind of the way things have been for several years. The best teams will always eventually rise back up to the top again because they have the best engineers, they have the best brains, they have the best equipment. There's a cost cap now in Formula One, so they don't get to spend 3 or 4 times the amount of money that the lower teams do. But they still have the best people, and so they will get back up to the top. And also, obviously, once everybody starts stealing ideas off everybody else when they see them in the pit lane, all the teams tend to get more close together in time, right? The slower teams get good ideas from the faster teams, and they slowly get closer together. But it's very interesting, Steve. It's definitely one to watch this year. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all pans out. It's more interesting than it's been for a few years, that's for sure.
I want to wrap this up going back to something that Kim and I were alluding to a little bit earlier, which was my trepidation or cautiousness throughout the Raptors season. The team started at 2-10 this year, and it was horrible. And it just looked like that was what they were going to be. What's been really great is since late November, early December, and Christmas time, each month the team has gotten better and better and better. And Gary Trent Jr. became a really, really great scorer. Pascal has become a star, a real star, not a superstar yet, but certainly a star. Freddie is an all-star, but he, again, a solid star. So OG Anunoby will also be a star. And, he just needs to stay healthy and play more. And Scotty Barnes could be a superstar in the next 3 years.
It is amazing that they won 48 games after starting 2-10. I'd forgotten that, Steve.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I now have to put you on the hot seat and ask you the question. Philadelphia's around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
They have the possible league MVP with Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
Couple questions. Is it going to be Fred who has to take on Joel, or is it going to be Pascal? Joel's too big for Fred, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's not. No. It's going to be the way it has been for the past 3-4 years. It's going to be a combination of guys. It's going to be Pascal and OG and Scotty.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that I have listened to Joel Embiid interviews 3 times in the past 3 weeks. And Toronto, he keeps saying, is the one team that knows how to stop him.
And
They keep throwing. They know how to throw multiple bodies at him. And they also are really good at getting back to their spots to guard when he passes out of that double and triple team that they throw at him. He's still, you know what? His scoring against Toronto is all going to be at the foul line.
Well, it all leads to my ultimate question is, can the Raptors beat Philadelphia in round 1?
Yes, they can. Will they? I think it's going to be a 7-game series, and I think it can go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I wouldn't feel horrible if they didn't, because this was, like I said, this is a building year. And this is if this is the building block for the future, it's going to be fantastic. They still need a stronger bench. They need, Chris Boucher has done really great work for them, but he can't be the first guy off the bench. Precious Achiuwa has been coming off the bench as kind of 1A. These guys are not that level yet. Precious seems to really be growing. It's only his 2nd year. He seems to be growing. It depends what kind of work he's going to do in the offseason, and then we'll see how he comes back next year. I don't think if they get through the first round, I don't think they get through the second round.
So there you have it. If you've made it this far, give yourself a banana sticker and let us know what you thought by leaving us a review and giving us a nice 5-star rating. And if you want to hear more of what we think, tap that subscribe button. And thanks for listening. Now you're an Athletic supporter too.